Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that people understand that if we do not reform Medicare, Medicare will go bankrupt, Medicare will be insolvent, and Medicare won't be there.
Would the gentleman yield then?
No, sir.
It sounded like you were wrapping up and you have time. That's why I'm asking you to yield.
Well, when the Speaker tells me I'm done, I'll be done. But when Medicare if we don't do this, the fact is that with Medicare, Medicare will go bankrupt, Medicare will be insolvent, and in the end, that's just immoral. We have a great opportunity here. We need to address Medicare. I think premium supports are a great way to do that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I ask a recorded vote.
To Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina will be postponed. Does the gentleman from New York wish to be recognized?
I rise as a designee of the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, to offer an amendment that is satisfied by the pre-printing requirement.
Does the gentleman specify the number?
I think it's Castor 1, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will designate Castor Amendment number 1.
Amendment number 1, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Wiener of New York.
For what purposes, gentlemen from Kentucky wish to be recognized?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order against the amendment.
Point of order is reserved. Gentleman from New York
Does
is
the clerk want to continue reading, or? I request unanimous consent that the reading of the amendment be dispensed with. Yeah, I'm recognized for 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I support this amendment. Hope we all vote for it. I just do want to take an opportunity to respond to the gentleman who was just at the microphone. You know, it is one thing to say you're saving Medicare, but if you leave a different Medicare when you're done, then today, if it's entirely different, how have you saved it? And I know premium support or price support is the term of art that is now trying to take hold as you desperately try to figure out how to explain what you're doing. But let me make it very clear, and if I say anything, the gentleman can rise, and I will permit him to correct me. Under the proposal of the gentleman from Wisconsin, under the proposal of the Republicans in Congress, that at a certain point in the future, Medicare as we have it today, as a guaranteed entitlement safety net program for seniors, will cease to exist. That's the Ryan plan. I will pause while anyone seeks to correct that. That silence you hear, ladies and gentlemen of the United States of America, is because I just said something that is factually correct. The Ryan plan, which is now the Republican plan, which is now the plan that has passed the House, would end Medicare as we know it. Now, that's never been something they've hid from before. They even had a book, the Young Guns or something. This gentleman from New Jersey, remember what it was called? It's like the Young Guns. They were parading them all around the country with this book that explained it. This is the way Medicare is going to look. And you say, oh, it's price support. Okay, it's price support unless you can't be supported by the price of the voucher. If you're a senior citizen, I say to the previous speaker, if you're a senior citizen and you're given this thing, call it what you want, a coupon, a voucher, a price support document, and you go around look for insurance in your neighborhood and you can't find it under the law that you passed, you're out of luck. But you're not entirely out of luck. Your family can go pay out of their own pocket and maybe be able to buy insurance. Now, you're a good, fit, healthy man. God bless you, and you should be so for many years to come. But the fact is many senior citizens can't go into the private market and buy insurance with a price support document or a voucher or a coupon. They won't be able to get it, which is why Medicare was created in the first place. Because the conventional way of saying, you know what, each and every person for themselves is the way we're going to get health care was leaving senior citizens out. And I want to explain to my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, a little something about economics. When we join together as a society, as a large buying pool, we get better treatment as consumers. We get a lower price. Fewer people buying car insurance, prices go up. All of us in a pari-mutuel relationship, prices come down. That's basic economics. But it's being violated by the Ryan plan, which is the Republican plan, which is the plan you now own and have to defend. But to say, you know, we're not really want to defend it because we're uncomfortable with it. It's yours now. And you say we're trying to save Medicare. We're trying to save it. If you want to save it, then it has to be a Medicare program. It can't just be some kind of a coupon. But I want to talk very briefly in my remaining time about this idea that we don't have plans. I have a plan that I want you all to consider. It's taking the efficient program of Medicare, which has managed to keep administrative costs far below any insurance plan in the country, any one of them. If any one of them can come even close to Medicare efficiency, then I would say let's go get that one, but they can't. Why is it we say that only people 65 and above should get that efficiency? Why don't we say to the roughly 30% profits and overhead insurance companies are taking, who needs you guys? You're taking our money. We're giving it to insurance companies. They're not doing any exams. They're not doing any checkups. They're not operating on any people. All they're doing is taking our money, taking 20% off the top, and then passing some of it along to doctors and hospitals. What are they performing in the economy? Let's take them out of the formula. Now, we didn't go this way in the Obamacare plan, which I proudly call that. But I have to tell you, there's a competition going on in this country right now between the for-profit employer-based model with a 30% overhead and Medicare with 1.05% overhead. I say Medicare for all Americans. It's an American democratic plan that we should extend to more people. You want efficiency? Get more people in that buying pool. Let's take advantage of the large numbers of people that we have, cover them with insurance at a lower rate. But we didn't go that way. We went a Republican way. In the Obama proposal, it was essentially a Republican proposal. It says, let's give them all health insurance. Now what you're saying is, let's see if we can do that for senior citizens and still call it Medicare. You can't. You can't. You say you're saving Medicare, you're destroying Medicare, and we Democrats and the people of this country are going to stop you.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose is the gentleman from Kentucky
Chairman,
rise?
I insist on my point of order.
Gentleman, state his point of order.
State it. Yes, to state it. We haven't heard what it is yet.
The amendment violates Clause 10 of Rule 21 of the Rules of the House because it has the net effect of increasing mandatory spending.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the point of order?
Yeah, I asked to be heard on the point of order. You know, it's arguable whether or not this does increase spending because all it does is change the effective date. But I can tell you this is the exact same argument we heard today from Mr. Cantor, who said they would not authorize any spending to help the people that were the victims of that horrible tornado recently, because that, too, would need to be paid for. Sometimes you have things that are emergencies in this country. Sometimes you have things that, frankly, under the emergency powers of this Congress, we should be able to implement. I believe that while it's arguable that the effective date changes the net expense of this bill, because all this really does, the fact of the matter is that we have a responsibility to seniors in this country. We have a responsibility to those on Medicare to try to save it, just the same way I would say we have a responsibility to the citizens of this country who were ravaged by storm. And to hear your leadership say we would not allocate any funds for that purpose without going through a budget debate is outrageous.
Chair is prepared to rule. Gentleman from Kentucky makes a point of order that the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York violates Clause 10 of Rule 21 by proposing an increase in mandatory spending over a relevant period of time. Pursuant to Clause 10 of Rule 21 and Clause 4 of Rule 29, the Chair is authoritatively guided by estimates from the Chair of the Committee on the Budget that the net effect of the provisions in the amendment would increase mandatory spending over a relevant period as compared to the bill. Accordingly, the point of order is sustained and the amendment is not in order.
Mr. Chairman.
Does the gentleman from New Jersey wish to be recognized?
Move to strike the last word.
Is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I wanted to go back to the issue of Medicare, but I also wanted to respond to the gentleman from Pennsylvania because he also brought up the issue of Medicaid. And I would point out that the Republican budget not only devastates and ends Medicare, but it essentially does the same thing to Medicaid because of the level of cuts that are put in place for Medicaid. Now, senior citizens are very much aware of the fact, I think, that if Medicare ends, then they're thrown out into the private insurance market and have to buy insurance on the private market at the whim of the insurance companies. that they're going to be in bad shape. They may not be able to get insurance. If they get it, it'll be a very skeletal package. It won't cover and guarantee their benefits. I think they also realize that the budget, if it repeals the health care reform, will go back to having this huge donut hole, which will cause them to pay a lot out of pocket, and also will eliminate the lack of co-pays that now exists for preventative care, such as mammograms and other diagnostic tests that now are free without a co-pay. So they're going to pay a huge amount of money out of pocket if the Republicans get their way by ending Medicare. But the gentleman from Pennsylvania also brought up Medicaid, and I would point out that many seniors are not aware of the fact that most of the money spent on Medicaid actually pays for nursing home care, because seniors, Medicare doesn't cover nursing home care, and seniors, when they pay out of pocket for nursing home care, usually run out of their money very quickly and end up staying in the nursing home because of Medicaid. Well, what this budget does is to basically cut Medicaid by almost $800 billion over the next decade, and essentially in half by 2022. That's not sustainable. What that's going to mean is, as I said before, when we didn't have Medicare, seniors couldn't get insurance, and they just basically got no health care unless they went to an emergency room. But if you cut Medicaid in half, and what's going to happen is there isn't going to be money for the states to pay for nursing home care, and either seniors won't be able to find a nursing home, or if they get one, it's going to be a nursing home that, because it's not getting an adequate payment rate, is going to be really awful. In my home state of New Jersey, I remember in the 70s, we're going back 30 years ago, when nursing homes were just awful. We had fires. We had people with horrible bed sores. I won't get into all the details. But the bottom line is that if you really devastate Medicaid, which pays for nursing home care, you're going to also go back to the days when seniors couldn't find a nursing home. Sure, of course I would.
And I just want to point out something else. Who's going to be left to pay for it? Obviously, localities in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and New York are not going to let people lie sick in the street. It's just going to mean local taxes are going to get raised, state taxes are going to get raised, because ultimately it's not whether people get health care, it's just how it's paid for. And frankly, by cutting it off doesn't mean that, it just means that we're passing it along in an unfunded mandate to localities. I thank you.
No, I agree, but I also would point out that many times the localities, because they're in budget, have budget problems, may not even pay for it at all, and so we'll end up with awful nursing homes or not even have nursing homes. The other thing, too, is that Medicaid also has waivers that pays for a lot of senior citizens to stay home and pays for their personal care when they stay home. Somebody to come in and dress them, cook meals, clean the house, that type of thing. That would also be gone or cut in half when you cut Medicaid in half, because the states, again, as Mr. Weiner said, unless the states step in and pay for that, a lot of those senior citizens that don't have to go to a nursing home and end up staying home and getting the personal care in their home or their apartment and avoid having to go to a nursing home, those programs are going to be eliminated as well. So, it is amazing what the Republicans are doing in this budget, ending Medicare, cutting Medicaid, and what that means for senior citizens. I mean, it's just an awful thing. And these cuts to Medicaid go into effect immediately and just get worse and worse over the next 10 years. They're not something that just, that isn't going to impact seniors right away. They impact seniors immediately. And it also applies to the disabled, because these are programs that are paying for the disabled. Everything that I said about people over 65, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid, also applies to people who have disabilities. And, I just don't understand it. Again, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, these are programs that the Republicans never liked, never voted for, never supported. But I'll mention one more. The other thing that the budget does is, because of the cuts in Medicaid and also the cuts in the S-CHIP, which is the family care program, also makes it so a lot of children who now get health care coverage are not going to get health care coverage as well. So, again, the Republicans are walking away from the seniors, walking away from the disabled, and walking away from the children.
Expired. What purpose does the gentleman from New York wish to be recognized?
The requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I say to the chair, when I was here at 6 o'clock and I was cut off by the chair and taken off my feet and lost my ability to speak for reasons that are only known to the chair, I was prepared to make my 5-minute remarks. The other members were prepared to do the same. And I just want to say that just as a matter of comedy, as a matter of us all getting along and figuring out, this is an important debate, and if the effort was to try to figure out a way to stymie the debate and to silence some of us, I just want to remind you that it's not going to work, that we're going to find a way to make this debate happen, even if it's late into the evening. But I just want to continue on a point that the gentleman from New Jersey made, and I want us to understand a little bit about the basic tenets of how Medicare works. Many members on the other side of the aisle came to the floor today and talked about Medicare being a one-size-fits-all plan. Medicare works because of its flexibility, because each individual senior, my father is a member of an HMO, he chose that option. People can go to an individual pay-per-service doctor. Those are the things that work. Now, there's no disputing that healthcare, all healthcare, is on a rising arc that is unsustainable. That's why the Republican strategy of doing nothing and drilling its head into the sand for years was no longer sustainable, and why we Democrats, without a single Republican vote, had to do something about it. That the arc of cost is strangling our economy, the arc of cost of not having people insured, passing along the bills to all of us, was an unsustainable model. That's why we made changes that made Medicare more efficient. For example, one of the things that my friends want to eliminate is the idea that under Medicare now, under the Affordable Care Act, under Obamacare, preventative services for seniors are reimbursed 100%, no copayment. Why do we do that, and how does that save money? Well, it's because of what our parents and grandparents have taught us time immemorial. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That by providing coverage for that, you actually save money in Medicare. How did we extend Medicare by 10 years? That's one of the ways that we did it. And what my colleagues fail to understand is that we acted just last year. You say, where is your plan? We acted just last year to extend the life of Medicare, to expand services provided under Medicare, to reduce the cost to the economy, to provide coverage for the uninsured, to reduce the burden on localities and cities that have to pay for the uninsured. Now, that's what we did. And what are you doing? You're saying, let's take not only the Affordable Care Act and eliminate all of those protections, but let's go back 40-some-odd years and let's eliminate the Medicare Act, and let's replace it with something that, oh, lo and behold, takes taxpayer dollars and gives it to insurance companies. Now, anyone watching this movie from the beginning know that that's your basic modus operandi, that that's what you always seek to do, is to enrich insurance companies. But if you want to provide care for seniors, Democratic seniors, Republican seniors, seniors with no party affiliation, Medicare has turned out to be a very efficient way to do it. Does that mean there are not rising health care costs across the board? Yes, but I'm going to tell you something. Here's this for an interesting little fact. Medicare's rise in cost is actually less than the private insurance market. Well, how can that be? Because, as I said, Medicare doesn't take money for profits. Medicare doesn't take money for shareholders. Medicare doesn't take money for advertisements. Medicare doesn't take money for giant call centers where you call them and they put you on hold and then ultimately don't give you their service. They don't give giant bonuses to their CEOs. Medicare is an efficient program that's well run, because that's how we roll, we Democrats. We do efficient programs that are well run. And what do? You want to eliminate them. You like that? That's how they roll. They want to eliminate these programs. But we're standing in the way, but we're not standing alone, because seniors of all stripes, and even people who are young people who want to someday become seniors, understand a program that works when they see it. And they also understand a party in retreat when they see it, I say to my good friend. We see how you guys are coming down here. Well, it's not a voucher, it's a coupon. It's not a coupon, it's a price support. Earlier in the day, someone said, you're draining the federal government. One size fits all. You guys, I have not seen so much defensive talk in years. But you ought to be a little bit defensive about this, because we found out what you believe in. You know, you campaign on what you're against, and this is apparently it. But here it is. Now you got to defend it. You should do a better job than simply saying, oh, no, 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 we love this Democratic program. We're not trying to hurt it. American people are much too smart for this. They know if you say we're taking away a guaranteed protection and we're replacing it with a price support document or whatever euphemism you're going to work, that we Democrats are going to stand up and call you on it every day. And you can huff and you can puff, but eventually it's going to be us blowing your house down, and ultimately it's going to be the citizens of this country saying, you know what, I remember now why we put Democrats in charge when we want to take care of people, because they create programs like Medicare and Republicans want to eliminate them.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seeing no other speakers, I move that the committee of the whole do now rise.
Question is on the motion that the committee rise. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Can you let me know? Well, I guess
Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1216, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that that committee has had under consideration H.R. 1216 and has come to no resolution thereon. The Chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize 2 individuals from my district who were recently selected to receive NASA's Aeronautics Scholarship Award. Khalil Ramadi and Robert Schroeder, both of which are students at Penn State University. The Aeronautics Scholarships Program, which is in its 4th year, aids students enrolled in fields related to aeronautics and aviation studies. These gentlemen are 2 of 25 undergraduates and graduate students selected from hundreds of applicants from across the country to receive aeronautics scholarships. Robert and Khalil have the opportunity to intern with NASA researchers and directly work on projects such as managing air traffic more efficiently and improving safety. They'll be a part of a nationwide team of researchers who are pursuing an ambitious set of aeronautics technology development goals. Their hard work has gotten them to this point, and through this award they will now play an even bigger role in contributing to our nation's pursuit of solutions for some of the most pressing challenges facing air transportation system today. I want to thank Khalil and Robert for their hard work and dedication. Congratulations for this honored distinction. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Are there further 1-minute requests? The Chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leaves of absence requested for Mr. Frelinghuysen of New Jersey for today and Ms. Hanabusa of Hawaii for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January the 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bartlett, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to spend just a few moments putting the debate that we're having on Medicare in perspective. This year, our budget deficit will be close to $1.6 trillion. That's a really big number. What does it mean? Well, it means that about every 6 hours, as a matter of fact, a little less than that, we accumulate another $1 billion deficit. That adds another $1 billion to our debt. This $1.6 trillion is, as a matter of fact, about $500 billion more than all the money that we come here to vote to spend. We spend the better part of 12 months debating a large number of authorizing bills and voting the appropriation bills to spend just a little over $1 trillion. Our deficit is $1.6 trillion. That means it's about $0.5 trillion more than all the money we vote to spend. What that means is, Mr. Speaker, that if we had no military, just don't fund it, send all the service people home. If we had no Department of Education, no Department of Commerce, if we emptied all of those large buildings full of government bureaucrats, we'd still have about $0.5 trillion deficit. What that means, of course, that there is no chance, no opportunity of balancing the budget by cutting spending in all of those programs that we spend the better part of a year debating here. Well, if that wouldn't balance the budget, what then must we do? It's very clear that if the deficit is about $0.5 trillion more than all the money we vote to spend, that a lot of the spending that accumulates this deficit is in programs that we don't vote to spend money on. These are programs that pay the interest on the debt. That's kind of mandatory spending. If you don't do that, you're in big trouble. And it's Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And so in this debate on Medicare, it's not just the Medicare trust fund that we're talking about that will go bankrupt. It will. Because today and every day, with no time out for holidays or weekends, 10,000 of our baby boomers retire. And they stop paying into these funds, and they start drawing from these funds. And so as we debate this subject, we need to remember that it's bigger than Medicare. That even if you could argue that Medicare will somehow magically be solvent, it really won't matter if we have a country that's bankrupt, will it? Because you can't have a Medicare program in a country that has no government because it has gone bankrupt, and that's what's going to happen if we don't get a handle on this debt. And it's a huge problem. Our leadership on our side of the aisle worked very hard to keep the promise that was made during the campaign of cutting $100 billion from spending this year. That's a lot of money to cut. But even if we had cut $100 billion, that would have been 1/16 of the deficit. But it turned out to be an amazing disappearing $100 billion. It shrunk to $61 billion, then it shrunk to $38 billion, and then when CBO looked at the actual outlays this year, how much we would save, it shrunk to $352 million. That's, Mr. Speaker, about 1/3 of 1% of what we promised. And even if we had delivered what we promised, $100 billion, that would have been roughly 6% of the deficit, 1/16 of the deficit. So when we talk about these individual programs, it's nice to keep in perspective the overall picture of where we are. If you are excited by challenges, you'll be exhilarated by this challenge, because this is a huge, huge challenge that our country faces. We now are about a decade into a new century and a new millennium. And it's interesting to look back at the last century and ask ourselves, what was probably the most important speech given in the last century. Now, if you were to ask that question of 100 people, probably not one of them would cite the speech that I'm going to tell you tonight was the most important speech of the last century. But I think that if you were to ask that question 10 or 15 years from now, that almost all of that 100 people will tell you that this speech is probably the most important speech of the last century. It was given on the 8th day of March in 1956 by a man named Marion King Hubbard, generally known as M. King Hubbard, to a group of oil people in San Antonio, Texas. At that time, the United States was king of oil. We were the first major industrialized nation in the world. We were pumping more oil. We were using more oil. We were exporting more oil than any other country in the world. And M. King Hubbard told this group of oil specialists that in just 14 years, by 1970, the United States would reach its maximum oil production. That no matter what they did after that, oil production in this country would fall off. That was audacious. It was unbelievable. As a matter of fact, it wasn't believed. M. King Hubbard was relegated to the lunatic fringe. How could it be that a country that had discovered this much oil was king of oil, producing more oil, consuming more oil, exporting more oil than any other country, in 14 years is going to reach its maximum production and then fall off? You know, if you stop to think about it, oil one day will run out, won't it? I started asking myself that question a lot of years ago when I was teaching school, and I taught a class in biology, and all of the publishers would send me their textbook, hoping that I would use it in my class so they could sell it to the members of the class. And I remember I was asking myself the question, you know, oil can't be forever. When will there be a problem? Next year? 10 years? 100 years? Maybe it's 1,000 years. I had no idea. I had no idea when this crisis would occur. But obviously there had to be a time in which oil would run out. And if there's a time in which oil will run out, there has to be a time when you've reached your maximum ability to produce oil. Well, the chart that I have here shows what happened. He made that prediction here in 1956. We were here. He said in 1970, that's the peak up there, that we would reach our maximum oil production. This chart shows where that oil was coming from. From Texas, from the rest of the United States, from natural gas liquids. And then we made two big oil discoveries. He hadn't included Alaska, and he hadn't included the Gulf of Mexico. You can see Alaska there, just a little blip in the slide down the other side of Hubbard's Peak. And there you could see the fabled Gulf of Mexico in yellow there, the fabled Gulf of Mexico oil discoveries. It hardly made a difference, did it? The United States now produces about half the oil that it produced in 1970. And that's in spite of the fact of finding oil that M. King Hubbard did not include in his prediction. He included the lower 48. He did not include Alaska. He did not include the Gulf of Mexico. But in spite of finding a fair amount of oil there, today we still produce half the oil we did in 1970. Now, by 1980, if you look on the charts, by 1980 you could look back and you would say, gee, M. King Hubbard was right, wasn't he? The United States did reach its maximum oil production 10 years ago. Wow. What that means, of course, is that won't the world sometime reach its maximum oil production? How could you argue that the United States is not a microcosm of the world. If the United States reached its maximum oil production in 1970, when would the world reach its maximum oil production? As a matter of fact, M. King Hubbert predicted that the world would be reaching its maximum oil production just about now. Well, if M. King Hubbert's speech was the most important speech of the last century, one might ask the question, what was the most insightful speech of the last century? Now, I don't know if these two men even knew each other. I don't know if Hyman Rickover, who I think gave the most insightful speech of the last century, don't know if he even knew that M. King Hubbert existed. He was going to talk about the same phenomenon from a very different perspective. His speech was given the 15th day of May, just a little over a year later in 1957. The audience was irrelevant, but the audience was a group of physicians in St. Paul, Minnesota. For many years, his speech was lost. And just a few years ago, it was found, and it's on the Internet now. And if you'll just Google for Rickover and energy speech, it will come up. And I'm sure that you will agree that it is probably the most prophetic speech that you have ever read. I'm sure you will agree that it might very well be the most insightful speech of the last century. I have some quotes here from Hyman Rickover's speech. And you know, I'm sure that speech was still around in 1980 when you could look back and see, gee, in 1970, we really did peak in oil production in this country, didn't we? And, you know, looking at what Hyman Rickover said, there really should have been some pause, shouldn't there? There's nothing man can do to rebuild exhausted fossil fuel reserves. They were created by solar energy. Oh, it's really interesting. Almost all the energy we use today came from or comes from the sun. It was the sun that made the plants and so forth grow that produced our gas and oil. It's the sun that, with differential heating, makes the winds blow. It's the sun that lifts the water, and the clouds then drop it on the mountains. It runs down to produce hydroelectric power. No wonder many of the ancients worshipped the sun. They kind of understood how important it was to their economy, didn't they? They were created by solar energy 500 million years ago and took eons to grow to their present volume. In the face of the basic fact that fossil fuel reserves are finite, the exact length of time these reserves will last is important in only one respect. Wow, what a profound statement he makes here. The longer they last, the more time do we have to invent ways of living off renewable or substitute energy sources and to adjust our economy to the vast changes which we can expect from such a shift. Now, this speech was given in 1957. That's more than a half century ago. This next quote, I love this next quote. Fossil fuels resemble capital in the bank. A prudent and responsible parent will use his capital sparingly in order to pass on to his children as much as possible of his inheritance. A selfish and irresponsible parent will squander it in riotous living and care not one whit how his offspring will fare. You know, I think of that statement when I notice how eager we are to drill, baby drill. Drill more, pay less. I have 10 kids, 17 grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids. When the Vice President came here to try to get me to vote to drill in Anwar, I told him I'd be happy to vote to drill in Anwar. When he promised me they were going to use all the revenues we got from Anwar to invest in alternatives. Because more than a half century ago, Hyman Rickover said that's precisely what we should be doing, and we had not been doing any of it. I noted to the Vice President that we were going to leave our kids a huge debt. I had no idea then how really huge it would be, because that was several years ago. And I said, wouldn't it be nice to leave them a little oil so that they might have something to work with that huge, huge debt? The next chart is another quote from Hyman Rickover. Whether this golden age, as he referred to it, and wow, what a golden age it's been, whether this golden age will continue depends entirely upon our ability to keep energy supplies in balance with the needs of our growing population. Nearly 7 billion people in the world, and energy from fossil fuels, particularly oil, is absolutely essential to their survival. Possession of surplus energy is, of course, a requisite for any kind of civilization. For if man possesses merely the energy of his own muscles, he must expend all his strength, mental and physical, to obtain the bare necessities of life. When I first got some statistics on oil and the energy density of oil, I could not believe them. 1 barrel of oil has the energy equivalent of 25,000 man-hours of work. I saw that number and I said, that's incredible. That means it has as much energy in 1 barrel of oil, 42 gallons, as 12 people working all year long. I drive a Prius, and then I thought, you know, a gallon, not very big, a gallon of gasoline will take my Prius. The most recent mileage is 53 miles per gallon. Now, I could pull my Prius 53 miles, but it would take me a spell, wouldn't it? I would have to use come-alongs and hook to the guardrail or trees off to the side and pull the Prius, but it would take me quite a while to pull my Prius 50 miles, and that's just one of those 42 gallons in a barrel of oil. So I guess that 25,000 man-hours of effort is really the energy equivalent of a barrel of oil. And of course, what that incredibly cheap energy has done is to permit us to develop a really, really great quality of life. And Hyman Rickover referred to that as this golden age. The next chart, and he kind of missed it a little here, as you will see. In the 8,000 years from the beginning of history to the year 2000 AD, world population will have grown from 10 million to 4 billion, with 90%, well, we kind of passed that, the million to 4 billion, with 90%, well, we kind of passed that, didn't we? We're not quite double that, but we're past that, so growth exceeded what he thought it would be. It took the first 1,000 years of recorded history to accomplish the first doubling of population, 100 years for the last doubling. But the next doubling will require only 50 years. As a matter of fact, it required less than that. And the path we're on, you know, we're just going to have increasing numbers of people while we have decreasing supplies of energy to support them. The next chart, another quote from Hyman Rickover. You know, reading this, after 1980, when you could look back and see that M. King Hubbard was really right about the United States, shouldn't our leadership have sat down and said, gee, what are we going to do about that? One final thought I should like to leave with you. High energy consumption has always been a prerequisite of political power. The tendency is for political power to be concentrated in an ever smaller number of countries. Ultimately, the nation which control the largest energy resources will become dominant. If we give thought to the problem of energy resources, if we act wisely and in time to conserve what we have and prepare well for necessary future changes, we shall ensure the dominant position for our own country. Have we done any of that? This is the father of our nuclear submarine, Hyman Rickover. Great advice. The next chart gives a perspective that Hyman Rickover talked about, and this looks at the age of oil. It goes back to 1630. It could go back to the time of Christ, and the chart wouldn't change because the amount of energy we were using, the world was using, was so small it wouldn't show above the baseline here. And then we entered the industrial age. The brown line there is wood. We started with steam engines and fueling them with wood, and then we found coal, and that's the black line there. And then we found gas and oil. Wow, look what happened when we found gas and oil. Now, we're going to see this curve again and we're going to see it again and again. A very steep rise. With this very long time in the abscissa, that rise is really very steep. We'll see some other charts where we have stretched out the time and the rise is not so steep. But notice what happens at the very top up there. It fell off and then rose again. That's the recession of the 70s, the Arab oil embargo. You know, you need to thank them for doing that because we woke up. Look what would have happened if that hadn't happened and that exponential curve kept on rising. It would be off the top of the chart. Our next chart shows that in a different perspective. This is called the oil chart. And if you had only one chart to look at to inform you, this would probably be the one that you would want to look at. The curve that we saw in the last one, that red curve, I said you would see it again and again. And here it is. This is the curve. Now, it was very steep there because they had compressed this time, so it went up steep. And this is that drop-off in the 70s. Notice what would happen if we hadn't become more efficient as a result of that. This curve would be off the chart by the year 2011. The vertical bars here show the discovery of oil. And we started discovering it in the 40s, and boy, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, huge peak in the 70s. And then by 1980, the black line here represents the use of oil. By 1980, we were using as much oil as we were finding, and after 1980, we always have used more oil than we found that year. But no matter, because there's a huge reserve back here. So we are now filling this space between what we found and what we use by dipping into those reserves that we have. How long will they last? This chart indicates the future discoveries will be on an ever-decreasing slope. It won't be smooth like that because this has been up and down. That'll be up and down. But I want you to make your own judgment as to how much of that we're going to find. By the way, this chart was what, 04 was when this chart was created. And they were predicting that the world was going to reach its maximum oil production probably about, what, 10 or so there. As a matter of fact, they were somewhat optimistic, as we'll see a bit later, the peak oil production. The next chart shows some of that. And we can look at the next chart. There are two entities in the world that do a very good job of keeping track of how much oil we pump and use. Of course, we use all we pump. There's no big reservoir of oil anywhere. And this is the EIA and the IEA. One of them is a creature of the OECD in Europe, and the other is a part of our own Department of Energy. And these are their records of how much oil we have produced. And notice that for about the last 6 years now, we have been plateaued in oil production at about 84 million barrels a day. We're stuck there for about the last 6 years at 84 million barrels a day. When demand goes up and the increasing economies in China and India and the developing world, the demand is really going up. When demand goes up and there is a constant supply, what happens to prices? You know, 50, 80, 100, 147 finally. And that high price of oil combined with a silly housing bubble that we produced in this country, and the world's economies kind of near collapsed. And then oil fell to a bit under $40 a barrel. But as soon as the economies picked up again, the price of oil increased, and now it's what? Roughly $100 a barrel. The next chart looks at the world picture, and the dark blue on the bottom here is conventional oil. Notice that it increases up to, they have it about 2006. There is now general recognition by experts all over the world. Even the naysayers like ExxonMobil and CERA, Cambridge Energy Research Associates, now concede that oil peaked in about 2006. But we have had unconventional oil, And we have had natural gas liquids. We're providing more and more natural gas, and there's natural gas liquids. You won't probably put that in your fuel tank because it's propane and butane and that kind of energy source. This chart admits that we have reached a peak and it's going to fall off. Doesn't this look very much like Hubbard's curve for our country? Falling off. Now, I'm sorry I don't have the next chart that they created just 2 years after this, but let me tell you the differences. The chart they created 2 years after this has two main differences. One, it went out to 2035 instead of 2030. Notice that the total oil production, adding up all of these various sources of oil, came to 106 million barrels a day, they thought, by 2030. Now, just 2 years later, this was an 08 chart. By 10, they had produced a chart that said that the peak production 5 years later was going to be only 96 million barrels a day. They had lowered their expectations. And they also had lowered their expectations of how much oil we're going to be getting from our current fields, because this line had dropped off considerably lower in their chart just 2 years later. Now, they have our availability of oil ever going up and up, down to only 96 million barrels a day in 2035 in their next chart. But the contribution to that is very little of it comes from our conventional oil. Most of it is going to come from oil from fields that we have discovered and not developed. That's the light blue. And the red there is from fields yet to be discovered. And that disparity is even more acute in the chart that they developed just 2 years later. I will tell you with considerable confidence that those two wedges are not going to occur in anything like that magnitude. The world inevitably will follow the same curve that the United States followed. We reached a peak in 1970. We have been falling off ever since. Today, in spite of finding oil in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico, in spite of drilling more oil wells than all the rest of the world put together, today we produce half the oil we did in 1970. This relates to the discussion that we're having about the budget and about Medicare. Paul Ryan had a bill which he called the roadmap, and it was a way to get at the problem of our deficit. And it was pretty tough. It was so tough that only about 12 or 13 of us signed on to that roadmap. And then we came to the budget debate, and all but 4 Republicans voted for that budget. I was almost the 5th one not to, because I didn't think that it was going to solve our problem. It didn't cut enough. We weren't going to balance the budget. Paul says that his budget pays down the debt, but it doesn't balance for 25 years. And to make it balance in 25 years, he projects fairly robust growth. That robust growth will not occur, because as soon as the world's economy picks up and the demand for oil picks up, since we have done nothing that we were advised to do by Hyman Rickover more than 50 years ago in planning an orderly transition to other sources of energy. When the price of oil goes up again to $125, $150 a barrel, the world's economy will be exposed. But even if you believe that our economy is going to pick up, and it won't, it still takes 25 years to balance the budget. So what we're talking about tonight in this energy thing really, really is important in our budget debate as well. The next chart is an interesting one. And what it shows is, and this was several years ago, before the peaking of oil, and it shows the exports in the world and when they thought oil would peak. And here's the year they thought it would peak, and some of them a very long time from now. Well, Dufay said before 2009, and it certainly was before 2009, but it occurred earlier than, well, 2006 and 2007. It occurred in 2006. The next chart shows exactly these same things in a pictorial form. So you can see some of them, they weren't going to miss the bet, were they? They could occur any time during those many, many years there. But there's almost unanimous agreement now that oil did peak in 2006. The next chart shows 4 studies. There are 5 reports, but there were only 4 studies because 2 reports came from the same study. Your government paid for 4 different studies. 2 of them issued in 2005, and 2 of them issued in 2007. There was a second iteration of the DOE report here that occurred in that occurred a little later, but 2005 and 2007. They all said essentially the same thing, that the peaking of oil was either present or imminent with potentially devastating consequences. Now, why did your government pay for 4 reports? Because they didn't like what the first report said. And they got the second one and it said the same thing. They didn't like that either. And so they ordered a 3rd one, and they didn't like what that report said either. And so the president finally ordered the National Petroleum Council report. The next chart is one of the quotes from the first report, which is the big SAIC report. And Dr. Robert Hirsch was the leading investigator, so it's frequently called the Hirsch report. And I have a couple of quotes from this. The peaking of world oil production presents the U.S. and the world with an unprecedented risk management problem. As peaking is approached, liquid fuel prices and price volatility will increase dramatically, up to $149 a barrel. And without timely mitigation, the economic, social, and political costs will be unprecedented. The next chart. And this was all out there since 2005. World production of conventional oil will reach a maximum and decline thereafter. They said that with quite some confidence because it happened in the United States, unquestionably. And the United States has to be a microcosm of the world. That maximum is called the peak. A number of confident forecasters projected peaking within a decade. Others contend it will occur later. Well, it occurred well within the decade. The world has never faced a problem like this. It's unprecedented. Without massive mitigation, more than a decade before the fact, the problem will be pervasive and will not be temporary. Previous energy transitions, wood to coal and coal to oil, were gradual and evolutionary. Oil peaking will be abrupt and revolutionary. This was in 2005. Your government didn't like what that report said, so they just ignored it. The same year, another report, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I have several quotes. The current price of oil is $45 to $57 a barrel and is expected to stay that way for several years. Wow. Even the experts get it wrong sometimes, don't they? Oil prices may go significantly higher, and some have predicted prices ranging up to $180 a barrel in a few years. Well, it reached 147, but it didn't reach 180 because the economy collapsed and the demand for oil went down, and with the demand down, the price went down. The next chart is another quote from this same study. Petroleum experts Colin Campbell, Jean Laherrère, Brian Ferry, Robin Blankert, Richard Dunkert, Youngquist, Albert Bartlett, my namesake. I wish I had some of his genes. He has given a great speech on energy. Google for Albert Bartlett an energy speech. He's probably given this speech about 2,000 times now. It's the best speech I've ever heard on energy. Have estimated that a peak in conventional oil production will occur around 2005. It occurred in 2006. They didn't miss it very much. The next statement, this is not from the Corps of Engineers, but it's a statement from Condoleezza Rice, which I thought was a very insightful statement. We do have to do something about the energy problem. I can tell you that nothing has really taken me aback more as Secretary of State than the way that the politics of energy is, I will use the word, warping diplomacy around the world. We have simply got to do something about the warping now of diplomatic effort by the all-out rush for energy supply. Good advice. What did we do? What did we do? The next chart is another quote from the Corps of Engineers. Oil is the most important form of energy in the world today. Historically, no other energy source equals oil intrinsic qualities of extractability, transportability, versatility, and cost. The qualities that enabled oil to take over from coal as a frontline energy source for the industrialized world in the middle of the 20th century are as relevant today as they were then, all ignored by your government. The next chart is another quote from this same study by the Corps of Engineers. Well, they're quoting Jean Laherrère. And you know, our Energy Department, and just go back and look historically. You can Google and find them, I'm sure. Their projections of what energy was going to be available to us. And this is Laherrère's quote on that. The USGS estimate implies a 5-fold increase in discovery rate. You have to have that much discovery rate to keep up with what we're using, for which no evidence is presented. Such an improvement in performance is in fact utterly implausible, given the great technological achievements of the industry over the past 20 years, the worldwide search, and the deliberate efforts to find the largest remaining prospect. We're finding more oil. One of the big finds in the Gulf of Mexico was under 7,000 feet of water, 30,000 feet of rock. And a big discovery of oil is 10 billion barrels. We use 84 million barrels a day. That means in 12 days, we use 1 billion barrels of oil. That's a staggering number. What that means is if you found 10 billion barrels of oil, and you can get it all out, that will last the world 120 days. Big deal. The next chart. This is Shell oil. By the year 2100, the world's energy system will be radically different from today's. The world's current predicament limits our maneuvering room. We're experiencing a step change in the growth rate of energy demand, and Shell estimates that after 2015, supplies of easy-to-access oil and gas will no longer keep up with demand. That didn't wait till 2015. It happened in 2006. But he was generally right. This was of an absolute certainty going to happen. The next chart presents us with a dilemma that many people are concerned about. It's a national security issue. We have only 2% of the world's oil reserves. We use 25% of the world's oil. We're only a little less than 5% of the world's population. We import about 2/3% of what we need. Many people rightfully believe that having only 2% of the world's reserves and using 25% of the world's oil and importing 2/3 of what we use presents an undesirable national security risk. As a matter of fact, there were 30 prominent scientists and thought leaders who wrote a letter to President Bush saying exactly that. Notice that although we have only 2% of the world's oil, we're producing 8% of the world's oil. We have drilled more oil wells than all the rest of the world put together. It's like several kids sharing a soda, and they've got half a dozen straws in one soda. You can suck it down pretty quick, can't you? And that's where we are with oil. The next chart is an interesting one. And what this chart shows us is the energy density of these various types of fuel. And notice that oil, aviation fuel, boy, that's refined, isn't it? It's got lots of energy. Natural gas, which is why natural gas is a great fuel for cars if you can have the infrastructure to support that. But notice all these other sources of energy. The energy density in oil is just incredible. There is nothing else. There's no readily available source of energy that comes even close to the energy density in oil as we look at alternatives. The next chart. And some people will tell you, yeah, I know oil is short, but who cares? Because we are king of coal. We're the Saudi Arabia of coal. We have enough coal to last us for a long time. I've had members tell me that it will last us 500 years. A commonly quoted amount of coal is we have 250 years supply of coal at current use rates. Note when people tell you how much of something we have at current use rates. Think about what increasing use will do to that. If we increase the use of coal only 2%, and we'll increase the use more than that as we run down on oil, and we have learned to do what Hitler did and South Africa did to create oil and gas from coal. Just a 2% growth doubles in 35 years. That's not enough growth to keep our stock market happy. It wants more than 2%. But 2% doubles in 35 years. It's 4 times bigger in 70 years. It's 8 times bigger in 105 years. It's 16 times bigger in 140 years. So that 250 years of coal, this line, shrinks to just 50 years of coal. Well, 85 if you use it as coal, but if you're going to use some of the energy to convert it to a gas or a liquid, now it shrinks to 50 years. So your 250 years shrinks to 50 years if you have only 2% increase in its use, and if you convert it to a gas or a liquid. But the reality is that there is no way you can avoid sharing that coal or the gas or oil you get from it with the world. Because if you use oil or gas that you've made from your coal, then somebody else buys the oil from Saudi Arabia or Hugo Chavez. So the reality is that you have no alternative but to share it with the world. We use 1/4 of the world's oil, so that means it will last the world 12.5 years. Now, the National Academy of Sciences says we haven't looked at the the coal reserves for a long while, since the 70s. And they think we probably have about 100 years of coal at current use rates. But even if we had 250 years at current use rates, just 2% growth shrinks to 85. Converted to gas or liquid, it drops to 50, and you have no alternative but to share it with the world, so it drops to 12.5 years. The next chart shows us something very interesting. What it shows us is that we don't have to look to a decreased quality of life if we're using less energy. This is the Human Development Index. It's a per capita energy consumption. You notice that we share a lone position way out there at the end of the curve. But notice how flat that curve is on top. That people using roughly half the energy we do, the Human Development Index, which is life expectancy, educational level, relative income, is about the same as ours, using only half the energy we use. As a matter of fact, that's where Europe is. They use half the energy we use. The next chart looks at some of the same phenomena in a different way. This is how happy people are with their station in life. Now, here we are, using the most energy. That's on the bottom, how much energy you're using. We use the most energy, and we're pretty happy about things, aren't we? But notice how many countries, I think there are 22 of them, that feel better about their quality of life than we feel, using some of them only half as much energy as we use. Now, on both of these curves, you have to get back down to about here, which is about the 1/3 as much energy as we use before you start falling off quickly. in these indices or in your perception of quality of life. The next chart looks at our energy consumption. Where does our energy come from? We've been talking about oil, but we're getting energy from a lot of other sources too, from natural gas, most of it from oil, from petroleum, from coal, from nuclear, about 8%, which is about 19% of our electricity. This is total energy production, not electricity. But 19% of our electricity comes from nuclear. If you don't like nuclear, drive down the road tonight and note that every fifth house and every fifth business would have no lights if we had no nuclear. So it's a little wedge in there, 6%, which is renewables. Just 6%. And notice, well, hydroelectric is a big part of that. Biomass, that's the paper industry and the wood industry burning byproducts and so forth, and waste to energy. Instead of putting it in a landfill, you burn it. Geothermal, that's true geothermal, tapping into the molten core of the earth. Wind and solar, those that are hyped, look how tiny they are. They have huge potential for growth, but for the moment they're pretty small. The next chart shows us something interesting, and that's about efficiency. The bar on the left, looking at incandescent lights. My wife got a few chickens recently, and she put a light bulb over them to give them heat, because about 90% of all the energy from the light bulb, more than 90%, goes to heat. But if you use a fluorescent, look at it. Enormously more efficiency in the fluorescent. And if you go to an LED, look at the ratios in LED. I have an LED flashlight. I forget when I put batteries in it. You notice most of the cars, the new cars in front of you, have LED lights. The next chart kind of puts this problem in a global perspective. This is the world according to oil. It's what the world would look like if the size of the country was relative to how much oil it had. Now, we've got to modify this a little, because WikiLeaks just exposed some papers from Saudi Arabia that said that they'd been fibbing about how much oil they have, that they really have 40% less oil than they said they've had. That's true, I think, of all of the OPEC countries, because back when they could produce enough oil to drive the price of oil down, they could produce a certain percentage of their reserves. So if they wanted to produce more oil, they just said they had more reserves. They didn't find any more oil, but somehow their reserves magically grew on paper. It was kind of a contest amongst liars, and Saudi Arabia was exposed. So it would modify a little, but still most of the oil is in that part of the world. Here's the United States, 2% of the oil. We use 25% of the oil. Our biggest supplier of oil is Canada. Our third biggest supplier is Mexico. Both of them have less oil than we. But Canada has few people, so they can export. Mexico has a lot of people. They're too poor to buy the oil, so they can export. Just a few months ago, Mexico slipped to number 3 supplier, and Saudi Arabia now is our number 2 supplier of oil. I want you to look at China and India over there. They are tiny. Last year, the Chinese bought 13 million cars. We struggled to sell 12 million cars. They have 1,300,000,000 people, and they're entering the industrial age. The next chart kind of looks at this